Hello everyone, welcome back to Voice Essentials. It's so good to be hanging out with you. Apologies for those of you who tried to tune in last week. I have been sick, and so we had to kind of move last week's show to this week. And I'll give you a heads up, I'm still not 100%. I'm still getting over what has been a really significant flu going around here in Brisbane, Australia, which is where I am, and we've had 3 COVID tests in the house, and we've double checked all of that sort of stuff. But it is a really significant rhinovirus going around my local area, and it absolutely laid me out flat, like really, really bad. So anyway, so I'm still on the mend. And still given to the occasional coughing fit, I must admit, because it's very lung orientated. And anywho, we'll get over it and we'll get through today, because we have got a fabulous guest, a special guest who we've had on the show so many times. And a little secret, the reason we've had her on the show so many times is she's a good friend. And she's just so fabulous. She's even so fabulous today, because it's 11 p.m. in Canada right now. And she didn't realize it was 11 p.m. She thought it would be 10 p.m. And so she's staying up extra late just for us. Her name, of course, is Dr. Shannon Coates, and we're going to have her come on onto the show in a moment. I wanted to just throw a quick shout out to Terry. I don't know if Terry's watching the show, but she'll probably watch it later. She's a private student of mine, but she also joins us in the live chat all the time, and of our live shows. And she's not well today. We were supposed to have our private lesson this morning, but I got a message from her husband saying that she was not well. She was in bed. So Terry, we're all hoping that you're feeling better, and that'll be. We hope that you are feeling better soon. So let's get into today, because we've got a really interesting topic that we're going to discuss today. There might be even a little bit of ranting going on. We'll see. Maybe we'll behave ourselves. Maybe we won't. We're about to find out, because it's a topic that I know both myself and Shannon are very passionate about, and so it's going to be interesting where this conversation goes. So I hope you'll stick around. We'll come back in just a second.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hey. Hello, Shannon. How are you?
Hello, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
A little bit bleary-eyed on a Sunday evening in Canada.
It's all good. That's what makeup's for. Doing it.
We are being joined from so many people from all over the world. We've got Kathy from Canada, who's from your home country, and then we've got Mackenzie in the US, and we've got Bing from the Philippines, and Linda from Hobart. And we've got people from all over the world, so it's good to have you all joining us, everyone. Shannon, thanks for coming on. How was your Christmas festive period? Was it good?
Christmas. It seems like that was a long time ago, Dan.
It was a long time ago.
Sure. Yep. It was great.
It was good, right? Sometimes it's good to remember the down times.
Yes.
How and so daylight saving sort of tripped you up a little bit, yeah?
It did a little bit, yeah. So when we talked about doing this, of course, I threw it in my calendar and all that stuff, and just somehow didn't quite realize that daylight savings. But if we had done it last week, if you had been able to do it last week, the daylight savings would have just changed, and so it still would have felt like 10 o'clock, even though it would have been 11. But because we're a week later, I'm well and truly in daylight savings now, and so it feels like 11.
Well, thank you. It gives me an opportunity to say thank you, not only for coming on again, but for help, because I came to you first to see that we could move the session. So thank you for moving it. I would have had to have done last week's show from bed, because that's where I was. It absolutely has wiped me out. And of course, as you know all too well, when you are a singing teacher and you get an upper upper respiratory tract infection. It's just the worst. Anyway,
No.
we're going to talk today about singing. I titled the video "Singing Past the Gatekeepers." So a couple of weeks ago, for those who watch the show will recall, we had Kate Baker come on, and we talked a lot about auditions. And we talked about auditions very much from a very positive angle, because there are a lot of positive things to talk about when it comes to auditioning for a band, auditioning for a choir, auditioning for music theatre, or auditioning for tertiary entrance. Mm-hmm. What we didn't talk about, because that discussion never went there, was kind of the dark side to auditions. Mm-hmm. And so when when we jumped on Messenger and we're having a chat about, so what are we going to talk about? I think it took us a couple of weeks to come up with a topic. Mm-hmm. And you came back and went, I'd like to talk about this. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And so I want to throw over to you to kind of frame up for us what we're going to talk about today in regards to the dark side of auditions.
Mm-hmm. So part of the reason that this suggestion came to the forefront of my mind was because of a couple of different experiences that I had with, not myself personally, but that I was advising someone that I work with in one case, and then talking to some other folks in a different case about. So those two kind of audition situations kind of coalesced at the same time, and in my opinion, it was in both cases, although very different kinds of auditions. In both cases, there was a case of either not full clarity around what we're looking for, and along with so this sort of feeling of like, the people who are auditioning are like, I'm doing my best and I think I'm fulfilling all of the requirements, but no one is really forthcoming with really what we're actually looking for. No one's actually saying what we really are, looking for. And at the same time, there's this kind of feeling that the people in charge are selecting in a way that doesn't seem honest. So there's these two, there's this kind of like real feeling of gatekeeping, really, what you said, right? It's this real feeling of gatekeeping where people are sort of setting up these parameters for you to be able to be successful. And first of all, you're not entirely sure what the parameters are.
Yeah.
Secondly, the parameters seem kind of arbitrary or not related, or not related to the thing that they're actually auditioning you for, or completely beyond your control.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. The one example is that we had. There was an arts junior. I think it would be considered. Well, it's middle school. So an arts middle school sort of grade, you're entering in at grade 5. Yes. So you're auditioning in grade 4. So you're entering in grade 5. So you do grade 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think that's about 10 years old. And so the audition requirements were just beyond the scope of what a 10-year-old could possibly do, first of all. Secondly, it's very clear that when those audition parameters are set at such a level, that what you're actually auditioning for is parents who have had the foresight and the money to be able to put that child into extremely high-level dance, drama, and singing lessons. So and music lessons of whatever kind. So the parameters are really, really what we're auditioning for is a very specific first of all, child who is mature and perhaps well beyond where they should, where their peers are for their age, but not necessarily because the child is innately talented or because the child has something that could be developed, but because that child happens to have been born into a family that can afford and also, values these very specific kinds of things. So
Yeah.
in that situation, you're not screening for talent. You're not, and I use talent very, very loosely in this sense, but you're not screening for potential. Sorry, is the better
Yeah.
way to put it.
Yeah.
You're not screening for potential. You're not assessing potential in any way, shape, or form. You're really, truly assessing who had financial means.
And
Really.
and I would argue, and there has been research into this, that you can't really determine at the age of 10 what the potential of a voice is.
Nope.
It's just not
Nope.
possible.
Nope.
Read one paper where 14 was the earliest that we could expect to be able to start to make a note of said potential.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about coordination, and by the time and coordination does not. I mean, so much about coordination. There's a reason we don't have child prodigies at the Met, right? Like, there's so much. It's coordination. There's a reason there are. Well, okay, so there are singing child prodigies, but that's a whole other thing, and whether they are actually or not, let's put that one aside. But there's a whole, I mean, the coordination that's required to sing well and to also not be mimicking. I mean, we're not, by the time to have something artistic to say,
Yeah.
and to be able to communicate. I mean, all of those things, yeah, it just doesn't come together for a while, right?
Yeah,
So,
and just on that child prodigy bit is that, and this is something I say to my students all the time, and it's something I'd really try to emphasize, is the child prodigy is the exception, and we
Yes.
acknowledge that the exception does exist.
yes.
The difficulty is that we build our rules around the exception. We build our expectations around the exception. But the exception is the exception. We would all like to be the exception, because we would feel better about ourselves. But the reality is, we're not.
No.
We're the rule.
Yes.
Yeah, we sit more neatly within the rule, and it's always so important to in maturing as an artist, to become comfortable with being a part of that rule cohort. Now, if you are the exception, well, I've personally never met the exception, and I've got some, what would be suggest, over the years I've taught some incredibly gifted singers, people who you would call have a natural inclination and
Yes.
gifting. But even then, I wouldn't then say they weren't, what's his name, Collier, the jazz musician. His name, Collier is his last name. Anyway,
Okay.
I mean, he's a prodigy. There's no question over the exceptional. He's all over YouTube. Someone will throw his name into the chat in a second to remind me with my foggy head. But the point being is that they're rare. The Mozarts of the world are rare. That's why
Yes.
they're the Mozarts. Anyway, sorry, back. I wanted to jump in.
Yes. Well, and even Mozart had, parental guidance and parents who are willing to be, and knew how to really direct that talent and, really direct that training. I mean, yeah, so there's so much to do with coordination around that. But what that says, for me, what that says in that kind of audition situation where the parameters are really screening for they're really screening for socioeconomic status, to be honest. And they're also screening, in some ways, they're screening for whoever is the oldest of their year. So I'm not sure actually how it works in Australia. I know in Europe it's slightly different. In North America, the year that you turn 4 is the year that you start school. So your cohort in your year could be anyone who was born from January to December.
Yeah.
So the folks who are born, so the folks who are born at the beginning of the year have a coordination advantage just because, and they're going to be, in general, they're going to be larger than the folks who were born at the end of the year. They're going to grow. They're going to appear to grow faster. They're going to appear to have more further cognitive development overall. I mean, there are obviously exceptions on both sides of this, but that is just the nature of the way that we grow.
Yes.
And yet we're all in the same cohort, and now I'm auditioning you. And so the folks who are born in January are going to be farther along in terms of coordination. I mean, it's just.
And at the age of 10,
yes,
12 months, even 8 months can be,
yes,
can mean just so much difference in physical, emotional, cognitive development.
Yeah.
And can really, make one child look like a child and another child look like a tween.
Yes.
Someone's just reminded me, Jacob Collier is the
actually
name.
that name.
Yeah. Thank you for the mind group in the chat. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, here in Australia, there is a movement within sport, and it's so interesting to me how within the arts, I mean, there's such an enmity between arts and sport. Certainly here in Australia there is. And which is funny because I actually really love my sport. So I've never quite understood just the passion with which the vitriol that some of my artistic friends have toward and against sport. But nonetheless, it's always interested me how much further down the track sport often is in their understanding of these things. And in recent years, there's been a movement, certainly within some of the contact sports, I know within rugby union and rugby league, to stop grouping children according to under 14s, under 13s, under 12s, but start actually acknowledging that, sometimes when you run on with an under, going years back, you run on with an under 14 and you'd be right to point out this kid and go, he's a man. Like, he's not under 14. What's going on there? He's massive. He's huge. And it's because he's matured earlier. And so there's this movement towards understanding that and starting to group them in accordance to weight and size. And so that, I mean, in the case of contact sports, that's protective physically. But I think there's something in this, isn't there, for us within the arts world to recognise and to be able to take on board and facilitate into our world of the arts. Yeah.
Well, and I think, I mean, that's an example from one side of things where that was likely a well-intentioned educator who set up those parameters and set up the requirements for that audition. I mean, it was likely a very well-educated, a very well-intentioned educator, but it was also very clearly an educator who doesn't understand the way that, what appropriate expectations are, first of all, for that age range, but also who doesn't understand doesn't seem to understand how assessments work and what you're assessing, and understanding what you're actually assessing. So, that was very frustrating. And the reason that it came to me was the reason that I was sort of involved in that I had in my head is that I knew one of the people who was preparing a student to audition. And you can imagine the level of anxiety that puts into the teacher who is preparing this student for a nearly impossible audition. You're saying, this student, this very young singer has been taking lessons for 2 years at this point, and many 10-year-olds haven't been taking lessons for 2 years, but at this point that, had been taking lessons for 2 years or however long. Not a very short or not a very long period of time. And these requirements are not feasible. Like, they're just not feasible.
I
So,
got to a point it's probably about 10 years ago where I started to realize that in preparing my students for auditions, I had started to become so knowledgeable, for the want of a better way of saying it, or having enough insight into the different places that my students were auditioning, that I was sending them all with, okay, you want to audition for this school. Okay, well, in sending you to that, I need you to be aware of this.
yes.
I need you to be aware of this political positioning and this unstated expectation and this political agenda from a tertiary point of view and yada, yada, yada. And I got to a point of going, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I'm sending you off to an audition that actually has no written criteria.
Yeah.
There is and actually I also know that particular person who is going to audition you're going to have to write my name on the audition sheet, and automatically that is going to frame you. And so I'd actually got to a point where I was telling them to put the name of their previous teacher on the audition sheet so that it didn't raise any red flags, so that it didn't create a
barrier.
But that in and of itself, it creates a level of dishonesty.
Yes.
And so you get to a point where you go, as a teacher, you want to protect your students from that sort of behaviour. And this is when we are, everyone, we're not going to go down the TV talent show route today.
Yes.
We've done enough of that, and I've got enough online about all of that. But it is part and parcel of the reason why we don't send these students to these sorts of spaces, is because there is no written criteria.
Yeah.
You are ticking unseen, unknown, undeclared boxes. And as a result, because when you front up to that audition, you don't know what boxes are being ticked or aren't being ticked. But what you do know, just intuitively as a human being, is that person who sits behind the audition desk has power over you.
Has power. Yeah.
And so what happens is, when you then don't make the cut, and we never know where that cut is, you automatically, understandably, reflect that back on yourself and go, I'm not good enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if there were criteria, we could go, I know I didn't tickle, I didn't rate in the criteria,
Yeah.
And we know, as good educators, I mean, they're doing this in my kids in high school. They come home, they've got a piece of assessment. Here's the criteria sheet. Where's your criteria sheet? I want to see. Let's step through the criteria sheet. If you want to get an A, you've got to get. Auditions never give us that.
No.
Ever.
So many tertiary institutions now have a grading rubric, but the rubric is completely internal, right? And it's very, very, very subjective, of course, even with a rubric. And singing is very subjective. I mean, performing is very subjective. There definitely is a level of subjectivity that will never change. And we hear and what we perceive is very subjective as well. So that will always be part of the process, certainly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
But that's what we hide behind, isn't it? That's what we hide behind. That's what we
exactly.
That's what we set up as the excuse, the reason that we get to position ourselves as auditioners, to not ever have to declare openly why I've made the choice to let one person in and reject another.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think with the tertiary institution, I mean, there have been studies done where listeners have done adjudications of voices, and if it's one person doing an adjudication, they are very unlikely to choose, like the recurrence rate of choosing the same person to win or whatever is very low, and then that success choosing the same person goes up with the number of panelists, right? So if I think the magic number was 3, if I remember correctly, this is a long time ago, something along those lines, or the where if you have 4, you're still at the same consistency rate, and 5, like it doesn't make a difference past a certain number, but I think the magic number was 3. Where you have the highest level of consistency in terms of always choosing the same voice, right? Or the same performance or whatever. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the grading rubric or with that openness in terms of what the process is, but that does say something about a tertiary institution, which often does at least have a panel. Not always, but often does have a panel.
Well,
when we're talking, yeah.
I was going to say the interesting thing about that was I, for 12 months, taught for a tertiary level private college. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing was actually the flip side to the coin was I wanted, as the only singing teacher that they had, I wanted to sit on said panel. But
Yes.
they would not permit me to sit on the panel because they didn't want me to actually create any gateway, because all they wanted was students coming in that could pay dollars. But the problem with that was then it was come one, come all.
Yeah.
If you can pay, you can have a place. But as a result, I then had a cohort of students who from absolute deserved to be there on a quality maturity level vocally.
Yes. Yeah.
Right back to I had someone in the class who literally could not string 2 notes together. Now, and that's okay. That's where they are in their journey of learning to sing. But they should never have been permitted to enter a tertiary level singing degree. Yeah. And so you've got, and so the only criteria in that particular instance, now this was a long time ago, and I do not know if that's how they continue to do things. And we're not naming the names, but the point being is that also is not the answer.
No, exactly. No standards is not the answer, of course, and especially not for that kind of program.
Absolutely.
And then, but a grading rubric or something that shows where you need to be is a very good answer. But the honesty about it, the honesty and the openness about it is what we're looking for, I think, and partially what causes so much angst, as you're saying, causes so much inner turmoil. The other example that kind of came my way, or that that I was involved with, is an example, and this is not only with this particular organization, but also with this happens all the time with our voice pedagogy programs at universities, at tertiary institutions, where the audition requirement for you to do voice pedagogy, for example, or for you to become part of a mentoring program for teaching, is that you have to sing. And this is a barrier for so many wonderful teachers who would be an incredible, you have to do a singing audition. So, and at first glance, that sounds like a great idea. You should be able to sing if you're teaching singing. Sure, but who's deciding whether your singing is good enough for me to now take you in and mentor you or teach you how to teach better? So do you really have to be do I now decide that your singing is not good enough for me to now mentor you as a teacher?
And also the aspect of that is, you might have a voice that is, Kristen Chenoweth
Yes.
level, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great teacher either.
Yes, yes. If I am auditioning or assessing whether I want to work with you as a teacher, I want to see how you teach. I almost don't care how you sing, or how you perform. I mean, I care a little bit, but I almost don't care how you perform.
And this is unfortunately, and the online space, YouTube and places like it, sadly, I'm constantly on YouTube being asked, why don't you sing more? You should sing more. I'm sorry, I'm not here to show my voice. I'm here to teach your voice.
Yeah.
And yes, at times that will require me to give example.
Of
But
course.
actually my pedagogy is not built on my voice. My pedagogy is built on a knowledge of voice that then instructs other voices. And but we don't see a lot of that. I'm not saying I'm the only person that approaches it like this, but a lot of what we see online is singing teachers, guru singing teachers going, watch me do it, monkey see, monkey do. Watch me do it, and if I can do it, you can do it because I've developed, the human voice does not work like that.
My innate understanding of how my instrument works and my coordination on my instrument does not automatically mean that I'm going to be able to teach you how to coordinate your instrument.
Bingo.
There's zero correlation there. I might be able to talk you through it, but it is not the same.
And people aren't rocking up to yours and my studios and saying, let me give you X amount of dollars to listen to you sing.
Nope.
Oh, no, you're coming, when you step into our studios, you're stepping in because this is your time, not my time. Now, yes, I could wow you with, C5s and knock your socks off. That's great. But that's only stroking my ego. That's not going to help you.
Yeah. And to be clear, I send sort of pro track or professional level singers to coach with someone who does the kind of singing they do, who is farther along on the journey than they are, who has done the roles that they want to do, or who is who's doing the kind of songwriting that they want to do, et cetera, et cetera. Or who has, done the characters that they want to do, et cetera. I will send people to coach with and to work with those people 100%, because there is nothing like hearing that sound in your ear. There's absolutely nothing like it. I 100% think that is fabulous. And at the same time, I don't have to be able to produce that sound. I can send you to see that person, and I can still get you to the teaching level. And if you're going to require, I can still teach you to that. And if you're going to require folks to send in a singing audition or to do a singing audition for your teaching mentoring program, you need to make it really clear on the application, and you're going to assess whether or not you want to take them into the program based on their singing audition. You need to make it really clear on the application that we're actually looking for singers here, and we want to teach singers how to be, or we want to teach performing singers how to be better teachers. We're not looking for you as a teacher. We're looking for you as a singer. Just make that clear
But then the challenge is that, and I see this with a lot of universities, certainly here in Australia, I can't speak to the US, but what tends to happen is, and this is where the unstated comes in, is they end up taking people in who are going to make them look good.
Yes.
And it just, whether I mean, we could be here all day coming up with the reasons that are the people that are going to make people look good. But I'm left so frustrated at times, going, this person would just be ideal they're passionate, they're determined,
Yes.
they're intelligent, they're good learners. You know, they're almost certainly never going to go out and cut a top 40.
Right.
You know, but, you know, I mean, I had one university, very high up person say to me, in reflecting on another university here in Australia, going, oh yeah, but they're only producing people for chorus. We want to produce the stars. And I thought, but the majority of people in a musical theatre are the chorus.
Are the chorus.
Like, and so all that speaks to is the ego of the institution and the people who are teaching in that institution. And I'm sorry, but I just don't get down with that. I do not. I would rather, do you know what? All that told me was I would rather send my students to audition at the other place, because do you know what that means? That they're going to be, firstly, they're more likely to get work.
Yeah.
Right? Because the reality is that the stars, I'm using this language, it doesn't roll easily off my tongue.
I hear you.
The stars are not, you can't produce a star.
Yeah.
Like, they naturally emerge. And there are so many factors that bring about that natural emergence. Because once again, it harkens back to what I said before about the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
You know, those people become the exception to the rule. The rest of us are in the chorus. But you know what? You can make really good dollar and have a career in the chorus.
Yeah.
And love what you do in the chorus.
Yeah.
And so that was a real warning for me to be not so keen to have students audition for that particular institution, simply because, well, that you just told me that everyone else is cannon fodder. Everyone else is just paying the bills so that you can produce your star.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that just doesn't cut the mustard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, absolutely. I mean, and especially when we were talking about the tertiary institution, we're talking universities and colleges, and we're talking about those programs. I don't know how the Australian system works. I think it's a little bit more similar to the Canadian system than it is to the American system. If that's my intuition, I don't know that for sure, but we really have a different system in Canada than we do than they have in the States, in terms of, you know, Ivy League schools, and we have a much broader. I mean, the University of Toronto is one of the best schools in the world, and anybody can go to it.
Yes,
It truly is. Anybody can go. So it's not, you know, it's on par with Ivy League schools, as is McGill in Montreal. I mean, it's on par with an Ivy League school, but you literally anyone can go.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't cost you $25,000 a year to go. So hey there. So there's a little bit more of an equality, I think, in Canada in terms of the programs and the access to the programs and the amount of you know, and also we're both talking as people who have we both have a lot of degrees, and so we're both talking as people who
we've both traveled the journey, right?
We've done this. We've both gone through this institution, so you know, so we're kind of, you know, I want to make sure that I am not saying that the whole system is rigged and that people are terrible. By the same token, there is still a lot of work to do, I think, in the system, and certainly in the States, I think there's still a lot of work to do, but just a lot of work to do around that kind of how are we, and especially, like I said, especially in the States where they're paying so much money. Oh my gosh, so much money to get a degree.
Oh, look, I was saying to. Might have just been over a conversation with my daughter. My daughter watched. There's a new Netflix documentary about the Ivy League issue that was just recently, where people were paying to get their children in, and there's a new documentary that Caitlin, my eldest, was just waxing lyrical over. She loved it. And we were just talking about the fact that I would never, having come from the working class background that my parents are, I could never have got a doctorate in America. It just would never have happened. Could not have happened.
Yep.
In fact, I don't even know whether I would have got an undergrad.
I was just going to say, I don't know if I could have got an undergrad.
Yeah.
In the States.
And so there's a real equality issue, certainly in the States. Sadly, in Australia, there's been a recent change around funding for arts and humanities subjects, and it's a real issue. I'm not going to talk to it because I don't know enough information about it. All I know is that the people within the arts and humanities industries are up in arms over it. And it is becoming, a really expensive road to take, and that is a problem, because arts is an area where you are unlikely to have a dedicated income pathway.
Yes.
So you end up, getting a ball and chain, which in Australia is called a HEX debt. And because our government empower us to, anyway, they pay for it, but you've got to then pay it back in time. Anyway, yeah, it's very complicated, and I love the fact that you said, look, we're not saying that across the board everyone in universities are evil, and but it is important that when people are preparing to do auditions, and whether it be for university, whether it be for a local band, whether it be for there are always agendas. There are, and often they will be unstated, they will be undeclared, and I say to some of my students after they've been to an audition, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah. Well, and often, especially bands, music theater, local music theater companies, I mean, especially when we're talking about that level of auditions, I mean, even at professional levels, like high professional levels, but at the closer and closer we get to the local level, the more and the more and more tunnel vision it becomes, in a way, where the people who are on that panel are really looking for something very specific, and it may have nothing to do with the way you sing. It may have absolutely nothing to do with the way you sing. It may have, and again, one of the things that is so frustrating about that is that it's not clear. It's not made explicit, this information.
In a touring music theatre show, it literally can come down to, will she fit the dress?
It literally can
come down to, you get the role because you'll fit the dress.
Yes.
Can we alter the dress so she'll fit the dress? And that's really harsh, and more often than not will not be declared.
No,
because that
not.
Then comes down to a discrimination issue, because it is.
Yes.
And it's a show not willing to pay the money to have a dress, a new dress, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it literally can be that.
Yeah.
So it's so important that when we're preparing for auditions, that we go into the audition understanding the key. This is what I say to all of my students who are insistent on auditioning for whatever it is that they want to line up. Your aim is not to get the role, or the gig, or the position, or whatever. Your aim is to step away from the audition satisfied that you did your best.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's the only thing you can control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because everything else is up for grabs.
Yes, exactly. And I was literally just talking about, we were talking about this I'm doing a group practicum right now with some voice teachers, and it's a practicum on working with young children actually in the voice studio, and we were talking about some of the big educational things that are in the education system, so backward assessment and goal setting and student driven learning and all these kind of big education ideas that are out there. And we were talking about how do we set assessments in our in an independent studio. And one of the great pleasures, one of the wonderful things about having an independent studio is that I am not beholden to someone setting a goalpost or like, this is what you have to do to get your A. I'm not beholden to that. And I'm not beholden to those auditions either. What I can do as an independent teacher is I can, with the student, set up an assessment protocol which is based on process and progress, right? So it's based on how far along in this process are you, and your success is you're always going to be successful. This isn't a just because you came and you get a ribbon just because you came. It's not that. It's we can set up specific measurable goals, and we can get to those goals and find the progress and the process along the way and celebrate those as your success measures. And I say exactly the same thing about auditions, Dan, like your personal success measures before you go into that audition, or before you sing in the festival, or before you do whatever it is. Set up your personal success measures first. And that's the only thing that matters. That's where you're grading yourself against, your own success measures.
Absolutely.
And there's unfortunately there's nothing you and I can do to really make it a level playing field, or at least to make some of these things explicit in the I just have to be frustrated and annoyed. But that's the thing that we can do for our students, of course, is to set those goals.
And it is that reminder to students, alongside that we're setting up our own measure of success, our own measure of satisfaction. Yeah. That the person who is, and I see this a lot in a Stedford. So back in my early years of teaching singing, I used to send students to a Stedfords. I no longer do that. Haven't done that for years because, unfortunately, I was always sending my contemporary taught students up in front of classical singing teachers who were then stripping them bare around breath management and all these sorts of things. And then I would have the challenge of well, this person's obviously really good because they were the adjudicator. Their power level is so high. And so the student comes back and then they're questioning my capacity and what have you, knowledge. I no longer make that mistake with students. But the point is that always remember that just because a person has been placed in a position of power doesn't necessarily mean they are powerful. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they are all-knowing. It doesn't mean that they have the monopoly on truth, or that they, what it does mean is they, in that particular moment in time, get to make decisions around who gets a tick and who doesn't. Yeah. And it just comes back to exactly what you just said. It's you've got to come back to your own sense of self, and so that. We probably need to, I'm looking at the time, we need to finish. But I think that then speaks to really working with your singing teacher or with the people that you have been working with to know when you're ready to audition, because it can be a really rocky road, and the process of auditioning is in and of itself can be, if you're not ready for it, quite soul destroying. So you've got to be ready. You've got to really prepare yourself to hold on to that sense of self. And don't, not that we can say that you'll, that in one sense you'll never be ready. In one sense you've got to just take that first step, but equally, don't step in there blind. Don't step in there having not really wrestled with some of these thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, especially if you are a person of a marginalized community in any way, especially then, there is lots and lots of discrimination to go around still, and it isn't necessarily overt, right? But there's still lots going around. So
and we haven't even. You're absolutely right to raise that, and alongside that, we haven't even talked about people's unconscious bias.
Yes, yeah.
Where the person in power is outworking a bias that they're not even conscious of. So, this all sounds very doom and gloom today, everyone. But I think, it's we talked about the positives first a couple of weeks ago with Kate.
Yeah, that's right.
But it would be remiss of us, and this is why it was so good, Shannon, when you mentioned the topic. I thought, we need to go there. We need to talk about this because it's something I know I talk privately with my individual students. But it is something that we as a community here at Voice Essentials, because I know many of us are preparing for auditions on a regular basis, to just be reminded that, these things are out there and happening, and it comes back to that sense of self-worth, which is a good place to land as we finish today. Well, it's now 9 to midnight for you.
Yep, it is.
And given that on Facebook you declared that you're usually a girl in bed by 9:30.
I usually am. I'm a very early riser, so I'm usually to bed early.
I used to, from my gigging years, I was a really late, but then you have kids and then you get changed, and then you go into the earlier you can get to bed, the better. And then you get, we're getting old, Shannon. Well, I'm getting old. I shouldn't. I know. I'm sorry. That was poor form. Okay.
No, it's true.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. We'll do it again because you're just a fabulous person. And with so much wealth of expertise and experience, I really appreciate you coming on. And
thank you.
Very much hope that we can get you on again in the near future.
Beautiful.
Catch you soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Dan.
I knew today's topic was going to be a little bit gritty is probably the term, and I hope you hear the intent behind what we're trying to really communicate to you all. We're certainly not saying don't audition. We're saying be wise. We're saying be discerning, and go into auditions with that sense of self-worth really securely in place, so that you can walk away and assess your performance, not the outcome. And if you get the gig, if you get the part, if you get into the tertiary level that you're wanting to, then that is just fabulous. And of course, if you want to get the gig and get the part or get into the tertiary level institution that you want to, you have to do the audition. But go into it wisely, go into it with maturity. I can't believe my voice actually held out. There you go. Hopefully we'll catch up with you all next week when we'll do a Q&A. Hopefully my voice will be in a lot better condition because I'll be answering your questions as we do every now and then. And then next week is our last live session for the next certainly for the next week, because after that it's Easter here in Australia, so we'll be not doing a show. Anyway, I'll tell you all about it next week when you front up for our Q&A, when we'll answer your questions to the best of my ability. and we'll catch you all again soon. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you soon. I'm Dr. Dan.